The Mediterranean sun cast golden ribbons across the turquoise waters as Marina stepped out onto the balcony of their suite, her blonde hair catching the late afternoon light like spun silk. The Hotel Paradiso lived up to its name, a sprawling testament to luxury perched on the cliffs of the Amalfi Coast, where ancient lemon groves met crystalline seas. She should have been happier. This was supposed to be the beginning of her forever, the honeymoon she'd dreamed about since childhood, when she played bride with bedsheets and her mother's old veil. 3 days into their marriage, and already something felt wrong. Derek had been distant since they'd arrived, constantly checking his phone, taking calls that he claimed were work emergencies that couldn't wait. But Derek worked in marketing for a mid-sized firm. What emergency could possibly require his attention on his honeymoon? Marina had tried to be understanding, tried to be the supportive wife she'd promised to be just 72 hours ago in front of 200 guests. But understanding was becoming increasingly difficult when her husband barely looked at her. "I'm going down to the pool," Derek said, emerging from the bathroom in his swim trunks. He didn't meet her eyes. "You coming?" "I thought we could explore the town together," Marina suggested softly. The concierge mentioned a beautiful church with frescoes from the 14th century, and there's a little restaurant that... "Maybe later," Derek interrupted, already heading for the door. "I just need to clear my head. Work stress, you know." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door clicking shut with finality that made her chest tighten. Marina stood alone in their honeymoon suite, surrounded by rose petals she'd scattered on the bed that morning in a hopeful gesture, feeling foolish and increasingly anxious. She told herself she was overreacting. Marriage required patience, adjustment. Everyone said the first year was the hardest, but some instinct she couldn't name made her slip on her sandals and follow him. The Hotel Paradiso was a maze of terraced gardens and winding stone pathways. Marina kept her distance as she tracked Derek's distinctive blue swim trunks through the afternoon crowds. He bypassed the main pool entirely, instead heading toward a more secluded infinity pool reserved for the hotel's premium guests. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat a warning she didn't want to hear. She found a spot partially hidden by a cascading wall of bougainvillea, close enough to see but far enough to remain unnoticed. Derek approached a woman reclining on one of the loungers, a brunette in a red bikini whose laugh carried across the water like wind chimes. Marina watched as her husband sat down beside the stranger with the easy familiarity of someone who'd done it many times before. Watched as the woman reached up and touched his face. Watched as Derek leaned down and kissed her with the passion he'd been withholding from Marina for the past 3 days. The world tilted sideways. Marina's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not on their honeymoon. Not 3 days after she'd promised to love him forever in front of everyone she knew. But the evidence was undeniable. Derek's hand tangled in the woman's dark hair, their bodies angled toward each other with an intimacy that spoke of history, of knowing, of something that had existed long before Marina had walked down an aisle in white lace. She didn't remember starting to run, didn't remember leaving the pool area or stumbling down the stone steps that led away from the hotel. Her vision blurred with tears, her breath coming in ragged gasps that burned her lungs. The narrow pathway twisted downward through wild rosemary and olive trees, and she followed it blindly, driven by a desperate need to get away, to put distance between herself and the wreckage of her marriage before the pain could fully register. The path opened onto a small overlook, a semicircle of ancient stone where the cliff dropped away to reveal the endless blue of the sea below. Marina collapsed onto the low wall, finally allowing a sob she'd been holding back to tear through her. How had she been so stupid? How had she missed the signs? There must have been signs. The late nights Derek claimed were work dinners. The new cologne. The way he'd seemed relieved when she suggested they wait until the honeymoon to be intimate after the wedding, claiming he was too stressed from the planning. She'd been so blind, so trusting, so stupidly optimistic that love would be enough. "Excuse me," a voice said softly behind her. "Are you all right?" Marina spun around, hastily wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. A man stood on the path a respectful distance away, concern etched across features that even through her distress she could see were striking. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed simply in linen pants and a white shirt that probably cost more than her wedding dress, though its elegance was understated. What caught her attention most were his eyes, a deep brown that held genuine worry rather than the curiosity of someone attracted to drama. "I'm fine," she managed, her voice hoarse from crying. I'll be fine." He didn't look convinced, and honestly, she wouldn't have believed herself either. Fresh tears were already spilling down her cheeks, and her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together in her lap. "You don't look fine," he said gently, taking a few careful steps closer. "And you're on a private section of the property. This overlook is technically part of the owner's residence." He paused, seeming to make a decision. "But given the circumstances, I think we can make an exception to the no trespassing rule. Would you like some water? Or a tissue at the very least?" Marina let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "A tissue would be good." He produced a handkerchief from his pocket, actual cloth, monogrammed with initials she was too upset to focus on, and handed it to her. She took it gratefully, pressing the soft fabric to her face. It smelled faintly of cedar and something else, something expensive and clean that reminded her of safety, though she couldn't explain why. "Thank you," she whispered. "Would you like to talk about it?" he asked, settling himself on a wall a few feet away from her, close enough to offer comfort, but far enough to give her space. "I've been told I'm a decent listener, and I promise anything you say stays between us and the Mediterranean." Marina laughed again despite herself, a watery sound that felt like the first crack in the dam of her composure. She should leave, should thank this kind stranger and return to, what, her cheating husband? Her ruined honeymoon? Instead, she heard herself starting to speak. "I caught my husband cheating on me," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "We've been married for 3 days. 3 days. This is our honeymoon. I thought—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't know what I thought. That he loved me, I suppose. That when he said his vows, he meant them. But I just watched him kiss another woman at the pool like I don't even exist." The man was quiet for a long moment, and when Marina dared to glance at him, she saw anger flash across his features before it was replaced by something softer. Compassion, maybe? Understanding. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "That's an incredibly painful betrayal, made worse by the timing. You deserve better than that." Those words, "you deserve better," hit Marina like a wave. Did she deserve better? She'd spent so long trying to be what Derek wanted, molding herself into the perfect girlfriend, then fiancée, then wife. Somewhere along the way, she'd lost track of what she wanted, what she deserved. "I don't even know who I am anymore," she admitted quietly. "I planned my whole life around him. We dated for 4 years. Everyone said we were perfect together. My mother loved him. My friends loved him. I thought I loved him." She paused, the realization hitting her like ice water. Maybe I just loved the idea of him, the idea of us, the happy ending I thought we'd have. "Endings can be rewritten," the man said. "They're not as final as we think. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise." Marina turned to look at him properly for the first time. He was older than Derek by maybe a decade, probably in his late 30s, with the kind of self-assurance that came from experience rather than bravado. Laugh lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes, suggesting he knew how to find joy even in difficult moments. There was something magnetic about him, a gravitational pull she didn't quite understand. "That's very philosophical for a stranger who found a crying woman on his property," she said. His mouth quirked into a half-smile. "I've had my share of painful endings. They taught me that pain is temporary, but the lessons last forever, if you're willing to learn them." He extended his hand. "I'm Alessandro, by the way. Alessandro Moretti." Marina shook his hand, noting the warmth and strength in his grip. Marina, she faltered, suddenly unsure of her own name. Was she still Marina Walsh? Or was she Marina Chun now? Did she want to be Marina Chun after what had just happened? "Just Marina." "Well, just Marina," Alessandro said with a gentle smile. "What are you going to do now?" It was a simple question, but it felt enormous. What was she going to do? Confront Derek? Leave? Stay? Every option seemed impossible, each one requiring a courage she wasn't sure she possessed. I don't know, she admitted. I don't even know where to start. Alessandro was quiet for a moment, gazing out at the sea. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. When I'm faced with an impossible decision, I find it helps to start with the basics. Are you safe? Do you have somewhere to stay? Someone you can talk to? We have a suite at the hotel, Marina said, then laughed bitterly. The honeymoon suite, actually, prime accommodation for watching your marriage fall apart. The Hotel Paradiso, Alessandro said, and something in his tone made Marina look at him more closely. You know it? You could say that. I own it. Marina's eyes widened. Alessandro Moretti. Of course. She'd seen his name on the welcome letter in their suite, embossed in gold at the bottom. The Moretti family owned half the luxury hotels on the Amalfi Coast, along with vineyards, restaurants, and what amounted to a small hospitality empire. And here she was, crying on his private overlook after trespassing on his property. Oh, God, she said, mortification flooding through her. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I wasn't thinking. Marina, Alessandro interrupted gently. I don't care about that. What I care about is making sure you're all right. And right now, I don't think going back to your suite and facing your husband is what you need. Where else can I go? Marina asked helplessly. All my things are there. My passport, my money, my phone, everything. Alessandro pulled out his own phone, tapping rapidly. I'm arranging for your belongings to be collected and moved to a different suite, one of our private guest rooms in the residence wing. You'll have complete privacy, and your husband won't be able to access that area. He paused, looking at her seriously. Only if you want, of course. I'm not trying to make decisions for you, but you need space to think, and you can't do that if you're worried about running into him. Marina felt tears welling up again, but this time they were different. Gratitude mixed with relief mixed with the overwhelming kindness of a stranger who had no reason to help her. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Alessandro's expression softened. Because no one should have to face this kind of pain alone. And because... He hesitated, then continued. Because I know what it's like to have your world shattered by someone you trusted. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. There was a story there. Marina sensed layers of hurt hidden beneath Alessandro's composed exterior. But before she could ask, his phone buzzed with a response to his message. Your things are being moved as we speak, he said. One of my staff will meet us at the residence entrance. In the meantime, why don't we walk? Sometimes movement helps when your thoughts are spinning. Marina nodded, accepting the hand. He offered to help her up from the wall. Her legs felt shaky, but his steadying presence helped. They walked along the path in comfortable silence, the late afternoon sun painting everything in shades of amber and gold. The sea breeze carried the scent of wild herbs and salt, and for the first time since she'd seen Derek kiss that woman, Marina felt like she could breathe. How long have you lived here? She asked, needing to fill the silence with something other than her own painful thoughts. Most of my life, Alessandro replied. I grew up in this hotel. My parents built it 40 years ago when this stretch of coast was still wild and undeveloped. They had a vision of creating not just a hotel, but an experience, a place where people could find beauty, peace, and transformation. He smiled slightly. My father used to say that everyone who came through our doors was on a journey, even if they didn't know it yet. That's beautiful, Marina said softly. He was a romantic, Alessandro said, and there was warmth in his voice, but also sadness. Both my parents were. They believed in grand gestures and true love and happily ever afters. They had that kind of relationship, the kind that people write stories about. They passed away 5 years ago. A car accident on the coastal road. Alessandro's voice remained steady, but Marina saw the tightness around his eyes. It was sudden. One moment they were here, planning their 40th anniversary party, and the next, he trailed off, shaking his head slightly as if to dispel the memory. I'm so sorry, Marina said, her own problem suddenly feeling small in the face of such loss. Thank you. It was difficult. Still is, sometimes. They walked a few more steps before Alessandro continued. But it taught me something important. Life can change in an instant. The future we think we have can disappear like morning mist, which means the present, right now, this moment, is all we really have. We have to live it as fully as we can. They'd reached a wooden gate set into a high stone wall covered in climbing jasmine. Alessandro pushed it open, revealing a private courtyard that took Marina's breath away. Ancient olive trees provided dappled shade over terracotta tiles, and a fountain bubbled softly in the center, surrounded by herbs growing in weather pots. The residence itself was built into cliff, all honey-colored stone, and arched windows that glowed warm in the fading light. "It's beautiful," Marina breathed. "It was my mother's sanctuary," Alessandro said. "She designed every inch of it. After she died, I couldn't change anything. It felt like preserving a piece of her." A woman in a discreet uniform emerged from the residence, and Alessandro spoke to her quietly in rapid Italian. The woman nodded, her expression professional but kind, and gestured for Marina to follow her. "Sophia will show you to your room," Alessandro said. "Everything you need has been arranged. Your belongings are already there, and there's a lock on the door that only you control. If you need anything at all, just pick up the phone and ask. Dinner can be brought to your room, or—" He paused, seeming uncertain for the first time. "Or, if you like company, I usually eat on the terrace around 8. You'd be welcome to join me. No pressure. Whatever feels right to you." Marina found herself nodding. "Thank you, Alessandro, for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay this kindness." "There's nothing to repay," he said simply. "Just take care of yourself tonight. That's enough." The room Sophia led her to was stunning. A suite with whitewashed walls, a canopy bed draped in gauzy fabric, and French doors that open onto a private balcony overlooking the sea. Her suitcase sat neatly beside the wardrobe, and when Marina opened it, she found everything carefully packed exactly as she'd left it. A note in elegant handwriting sat on top of her clothes. "Your husband has been informed that you needed space and have requested no contact. He has been moved to a different floor. If he attempts to contact you against your wishes, please notify staff immediately. Management." Marina sank onto the edge of the bed, still clutching Alessandro's handkerchief. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. Her marriage was over before it had really begun. In a few days, she'd have to go home and face everyone. The pitying looks, the gossip, the humiliation of explaining what had happened. Her mother would be devastated. Her friends would want details she wasn't ready to give. And Derek, what would Derek do? Would he even care that she'd left? But beneath the panic and the pain, there was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. For 4 years, Marina had molded herself to fit Derek's expectations. She quit her job at the art gallery to take a more stable position at his friend's marketing firm. She'd cut her hair when he mentioned he preferred shorter styles. She'd stopped seeing friends he found too dramatic or bad influences. She'd become smaller and smaller, shrinking herself to fit into the life he wanted, until she'd almost forgotten who she'd been before him. Marina walked out onto the balcony, letting the evening breeze cool her tear-stained face. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink and purple. It was the kind of sunset that demanded to be witnessed, that made you believe in beauty even in the midst of heartbreak. She thought about Alessandro's invitation to dinner. Part of her wanted to hide in this room, to lick her wounds in private. But another part, a part she'd ignored for too long, whispered that hiding wouldn't help. That maybe, just maybe, this disaster was the universe giving her a chance to remember who she was. At 7:30, Marina showered and changed into a simple sundress, turquoise blue. One Derek had always said was too bright for her. She left her hair loose and wavy, the way she'd worn it before Derek suggested she straighten it. She barely recognized herself in the mirror, and that felt right somehow. She was shedding Marina Chun before she'd ever fully become her, finding her way back to who she'd been before. Alessandro was already on the terrace when Sophia led her there, standing at the railing and watching the last rays of sunlight shimmer across the water. He'd changed, too, into dark pants and a simple shirt, and when he turned at her approach, his smile was genuine and warm. "You came," he said, and Marina heard the pleasure in his voice. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either, Marina admitted. But then I thought about what you said about the present being all we have. And I decided I didn't want to spend it alone in my room, dwelling on things I can't change. Wise decision, Alessandro said, pulling out a chair for her at a small table set for two. Candles flickered in hurricane glasses, and the scent of lemon and basil drifted from the dishes, waiting under silver covers. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of having the chef prepare some of my favorite dishes. Simplicity is a specialty here. Fresh pasta, local seafood, vegetables from our gardens. The food was indeed spectacular, but Marina found it was a company she savored most. Alessandro was an easy conversationalist, asking questions that required more than simple answers, actually listening to her responses. They talked about art, Marina's abandoned passion, and she found herself describing paintings she loved with enthusiasm she hadn't felt in years. Alessandro listened intently, his eyes never leaving her face, and when she apologized for talking too much, he waved her concerns away. Don't apologize, he said. Your passion is beautiful. Why did you stop? Marina set down her fork, considering the question. Derek thought it was impractical. He said I was too talented to waste my life in galleries, that I should focus on building a real career. And I listened. I let him define what was valuable and what wasn't. That wasn't his decision to make, Alessandro said quietly. No, Marina agreed, feeling the truth of it settle in her chest. It wasn't. They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams, and the kind of truths that people usually say for old friends. Alessandro told her about the pressure of inheriting his family's legacy, the weight of everyone's expectations. Marina told him about her mother's perfectionism, how she'd spent her whole life trying to earn approval that always seemed just out of reach. They laughed over shared embarrassments and found comfort in confessing fears they rarely voiced. Can I ask you something? Marina said as they lingered over coffee, the stars bright above them. Anything. Earlier, you said you knew what it was like to have your world shattered. What happened? Alessandro was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. I was engaged once. Her name was Gabriella. We'd known each other since childhood. Our families moved in the same circles. Everyone expected us to marry, and for a long time, I thought that's what I wanted too. She was beautiful, charming, everything a Moretti wife should be. He paused, his expression growing distant. But about a month before our wedding, I discovered she was only marrying me for the family name and money. She was in love with someone else, someone who couldn't provide the lifestyle she wanted. She planned to marry me and continue seeing him on the side. That's horrible, Marina breathed. It was enlightening, Alessandro corrected gently. Painful, yes, but it taught me that love without truth is just a beautiful lie. I've been so focused on meeting expectations, on doing what everyone thought I should do, that I'd never stopped to ask what I actually wanted, or who I wanted to become. Did you ever find out? Marina asked, who you wanted to become? Alessandro met her eyes, and in the candlelight, his expression was vulnerable in a way that made her breath catch. I'm still figuring that out. But I know I want to be someone who lives authentically, someone who builds something meaningful, not just maintain something inherited, someone who... He trailed off, then smiled slightly. Someone who helps crying strangers on his property and doesn't regret it for a second. Marina felt warmth bloom in her chest, different from anything she felt before. This wasn't the anxious flutter of trying to please someone, or the desperate clinging of trying to make something work that was fundamentally broken. This was possibility, connection, the sense that she was being seen for who she actually was, not who someone wanted her to be. It's late, Alessandro said reluctantly, glancing at his watch. Almost midnight. You must be exhausted. Marina realized with surprise that she wasn't tired at all. She felt more awake than she had in months, more present in her own life. But Alessandro was right. The day had been emotionally overwhelming, and she needed a rest to process everything that had happened. Thank you, she said as they walked back to the courtyard. For dinner, for listening, for everything. Today was supposed to be one of the worst days of my life, and somehow you made it bearable. Today was just a day, Alessandro said softly. Tomorrow can be anything you want it to be. That's the gift of a new beginning, the freedom to choose. Marina slept deeply that night, dreamlessly, and woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and the sound of church bells echoing across the valley. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot what had happened. Then memory returned in a rush. Derek's betrayal, her flight, Alessandro's unexpected kindness. She waited for the pain to hit, but while it was there, a dull ache in her chest, it was somehow less consuming than yesterday, as if Alessandro's words had opened a window in her grief, letting in light and air. Her phone, which she'd turned off yesterday, showed 17 missed calls from Derek and a string of text messages that ranged from confused to angry to pleading. Marina read them dispassionately, seeing the manipulation in his words that she'd once mistaken for care. "Where are you? I can explain. It's not what you think. You're overreacting. We need to talk. Don't throw away everything we have. Think about what people will say." But Marina was done thinking about what people would say. She was done making herself small to fit Derek's life. She typed out a single message. "We're done. Don't contact me again. I'll arrange for divorce papers when I get home." His response was immediate and predictably dramatic, but Marina deleted it without reading and blocked his number. It felt like shedding a heavy coat she'd been wearing too long, one that had never really fit, but that she convinced herself was necessary. A soft knock at her door made her look up. Sophia stood there with a tray holding fresh pastries, coffee, and a single white rose in a crystal vase. Beside was a note in Alessandro's handwriting. "When you're ready, come find me in the gardens. I'd like to show you something." Marina found him an hour later in a secluded section of the hotel grounds, working alongside two gardeners in a space that was half wild garden, half organized chaos. He looked up when she approached, his face lighting up in a way that made her pulse quicken. "You found me," he said, pulling off his work gloves. "I wasn't sure my directions were clear enough." "They were perfect," Marina said, looking around. The garden was spectacular. Roses climbing over ancient stone walls, herbs spilling out of every corner, vegetables growing in neat rows beside flowers in glorious disorder. "What is this place?" "My mother's garden," Alessandro said, and there was both pride and sadness in his voice. She designed it as a place where beauty and utility could coexist, where things could grow wild but still have purpose. After she died, it became overgrown, neglected. I only started working on it again recently. "It's beautiful," Marina said softly. "Like organized chaos. Like life." "Exactly," Alessandro said, smiling. That's what she always said, that a good garden reflects life. Not perfect, not controlled, but alive and growing and constantly changing. He gestured to the space around them. "I come here when I need to think. There's something about working with your hands, tending growing things, that helps put problems in perspective." They worked together for the next hour, Alessandro showing Marina how to prune roses, how to tell which herbs were ready for harvesting, how to coax reluctant tomatoes into thriving. It was peaceful, meditative work, and Marina found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. They talked as they worked, but they also fell into comfortable silences that didn't need filling. "Can I ask you something?" Alessandro said as they took a break in the shade, drinking water from bottles beaded with condensation. "Of course. What are you going to do? After you leave here, what does your life look like?" It was the question Marina had been avoiding thinking about. "Honestly, I have no idea. I'll have to go home, deal with a divorce, figure out where to live. Derek and I bought a house together. I'll probably have to find a new job. I can't imagine going back to his friend's firm." She laughed weakly. "Starting over at 28. Not exactly how I picture my life going." "Starting over can be terrifying," Alessandro agreed, "but it can also be liberating. You're not starting from nothing, Marina. You're starting from experience, from knowing what you don't want. That's valuable." "What did you do?" Marina asked. "After Gabriella?" "I traveled," Alessandro said. I left the hotel in my manager's capable hands and spent 6 months exploring places I'd always wanted to see but never had time for. I learned to cook in Thailand, studied architecture in Japan, volunteered at an orphanage in Peru. I gave myself permission to not know what came next, to just be. He met her eyes. It was the best decision I ever made. I came back different, better, more myself than I'd ever been. I can't just take off for 6 months, Marina protested. Why not? The question stopped her cold. Why not? Because it was irresponsible? Because people would judge her? Because she was supposed to stay and face the mess she left behind? But as she examined each reason, she realized they were all based on other people's expectations, not her own desires. I don't know, she admitted finally. Think about it, Alessandro said. Not forever, just for a little while. Stay here, not in the hotel as a guest, but here in the residence. Help me with the garden. Take time to figure out what you actually want without all the noise and pressure. He held up a hand before she could protest. Not as charity. As a friend helping a friend. You need space to breathe, and He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I find I enjoy your company, more than I've enjoyed anyone's in a long time. Marina's heart was racing. The practical part of her brain screamed that this was crazy, that she couldn't just stay in Italy with a man she'd met yesterday, that she had responsibilities and obligations and a life to return to. But a deeper part of her, a part she'd silenced for too long, whispered that this was exactly what she needed. Permission to put herself first. Space to heal. Time to remember who she was without Derek's expectations weighing her down. Okay, she heard herself say. Yes, I'll stay. For a little while. Alessandro's smile was like sunrise, warm and bright and full of promise. Good. That's really good. The next few weeks passed in a golden haze. Marina fell into a rhythm that felt both foreign and deeply right. She woke with the sun and worked in the garden with Alessandro each morning, learning the names of plants and the patience required to nurture living things. In the afternoons, they explored the coast together. Hidden beaches accessible only by narrow paths, tiny villages clinging to cliff sides, markets where vendors called out in rapid Italian, and the smell of fresh bread made Marina's mouth water. Alessandro introduced her to his world slowly, carefully, never pushing but always inviting. They took cooking classes from his head chef, learning to make pasta by hand, and studying the precise moment when a sauce went from good to sublime. They visited his family's vineyard in the hills, where ancient vines produced grapes that became wine Alessandro's father had laid down decades ago. They drove to Naples one day and spent hours in museums, Marina's passion for art reigniting as Alessandro listened to her enthusiastic explanations of technique and symbolism. But it was the quiet moments Marina treasured most. Evening walks along the cliffs, watching the sun paint the sky in impossible colors. Late-night conversations on the terrace, sharing dreams and fears and the kinds of truths that only emerge in darkness, the comfortable silences that stretch between them, full of unspoken understanding. She could feel herself changing, unfurling like one of the roses in Alessandro's mother's garden. The constant anxiety that had lived in her chest for years began to ease. Her laugh came more easily. She stopped checking her phone compulsively, stopped worrying about what Derek might be saying about her back home. She'd sent an email to her mother, explaining that the marriage was over and she needed time before returning. Her mother's response had been disappointing but unsurprising. Concern about what the neighbors would think. Questions about whether Marina had tried hard enough to make it work. Marina had read it once, then filed it away, refusing to let her mother's disappointment dim her slowly growing peace. One evening, about 3 weeks into her stay, Alessandro found her in the garden at sunset. She'd been sketching, another abandoned passion she'd rediscovered, trying to capture the way the light caught the dewdrops on the rose petals. "You're talented," Alessandro said, looking over her shoulder at the drawing. "Really talented. Why did you ever stop?" Marina set down her pencil, considering. "I think I stopped believing I had anything worth saying. Derek always made me feel like art was frivolous, like it was something to be admired in others, but not pursued myself. And somewhere along the way, I started believing him. He was wrong. Alessandro said firmly. Art isn't frivolous. It's how we make sense of the world, how we communicate things too complex for words. Your perspective, your vision, that's valuable. That's worth pursuing. Marina turned to face him fully, and something in his expression made her breath catch. There was intensity in his eyes, a heat that had been building slowly between them over the past weeks, but that neither had acknowledged out loud. Alessandro, she started, but he shook his head. Let me say this, he said softly. I know the timing is terrible. I know you're still healing from what Derek did, and I know this probably seems impossibly fast. But Marina, these past weeks with you have been, I haven't felt this way in years. Maybe ever. You're brilliant and kind and stronger than you know, and every day I wake up hoping you'll still be here. Marina's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. I don't know if I'm ready for this, she whispered. I don't know if I can trust my own judgment about people anymore. Then don't rush, Alessandro said, taking her hand gently. Trust your instincts. Trust what you feel when you're with me. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait as long as you need. What Marina felt when she was with Alessandro was different from anything she'd experienced with Derek. With Derek, there had always been an undercurrent of anxiety, a constant monitoring of his moods, a need to perform. With Alessandro, she felt seen, accepted, free to be messy and uncertain and still figuring things out. He didn't need her to be perfect. He seemed to prefer her real. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, Alessandro said. I'm scared too. But Marina, I think the best things in life are a little bit scary. They require us to be brave, to risk getting hurt again. And I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. I ran away from my wedding, Marina pointed out wryly. No, Alessandro corrected gently. You ran toward yourself. That takes courage. Under the fading light, surrounded by roses that had once belonged to Alessandro's mother, Marina made a decision. She leaned forward slowly, giving him every opportunity to pull away, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question rather than an answer. But then Alessandro's hand came up to cradle her face, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and setting sail at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Alessandro rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. Me too, Marina whispered. I just didn't know if I was allowed to want it. If it was too soon, too fast, too. Stop, Alessandro said gently. Stop measuring your feelings against some imaginary timeline. There's no rule book for this. Marina, there's just you and me and what we feel when we're together. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened naturally, organically, like one of Alessandro's plants growing toward sunlight. They spent their days side by side, working the garden, exploring the coast, helping the hotel when Alessandro was needed for management decisions. Marina began to understand the scope of what he'd inherited. Not just property and money, but a legacy of hospitality, a responsibility to the dozens of families whose livelihoods depended on the Moretti hotels. She watched him navigate difficult decisions with grace, treating everyone from housekeeping staff to the most demanding guests with equal respect. She saw him stay up late reviewing budgets to ensure his employees received fair wages, saw him personally welcome returning guests, and remember details about their lives. Alessandro wasn't just wealthy, he was purposeful, using his resources to create something meaningful rather than simply accumulating more. Why the hotel business? Marina asked him one evening as they walked along the beach below the property. With your family's resources, you could have done anything. Why this? Alessandro considered the question, picking up a smooth stone and turning it over in his fingers. Because hospitality is about transformation. People come to us in all different states, celebrating, grieving, searching, hiding. And for the time they're here, we get to be part of their story. We get to offer them beauty, comfort, space to breathe. Sometimes that changes them. My parents taught me that was sacred work. Like you change me, Marina said softly. Alessandro stopped walking and turned to face her, the sunset painting his features in gold. No, Marina, you change yourself. I just gave you a safe place to do it. But Marina knew it was more than that. Alessandro had shown her what it meant to be truly seen, truly valued. He'd given her space to rediscover her passions. Not just art, but also cooking, hiking, even learning Italian from the hotel staff who'd adopted her as their temporary resident. He'd introduced her to his friends, confident and successful people who welcomed her warmly without once asking awkward questions about her failed marriage. He'd created an environment where she could heal without pressure to be anyone other than herself. 2 months into her stay, Marina finally called her mother for a real conversation. She'd been putting it off, dreading the disappointment and judgment she knew was coming. But she'd grown stronger, and she needed to start building bridges to the life waiting for her back home, whatever form that life might take. Marina, her mother answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry and barely concealed frustration. Finally, do you have any idea how worried I've been? How embarrassing this has been for the family. Marina took a deep breath, centering herself the way Alessandro had taught her during their early morning meditation sessions. I'm sorry you've been worried, Mom. But I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. Better than okay? Marina, you abandoned your husband on your honeymoon. Derek has been beside himself. He says you won't return his calls, that you've blocked him. I caught him cheating on me, Marina interrupted quietly. On our honeymoon, with another woman at our hotel. The silence on the other end was deafening. When her mother finally spoke, her voice had changed, become smaller. What? Marina explained what happened, keeping her voice steady and factual. She'd expected her mother to make excuses for Derek, to find ways to blame Marina. Instead, she heard her mother start to cry. Oh, honey, her mother said, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I pushed you so hard to marry him. I thought he was perfect for you. I thought I was helping. You were trying to help, Marina said gently, surprised by the compassion she felt. You wanted me to be happy and secure. I know that. But, Mom, I need to live my own life. Make my own choices. Even if they're mistakes, they need to be my mistakes. Are you coming home? Her mother asked. Marina looked out at the Mediterranean, at the life she'd been building here. Eventually, but not yet. I'm not ready. What are you doing over there? Where are you even staying? Marina smiled, thinking of Alessandro, of the garden they tended together, of the future that was slowly taking shape in her mind. I'm figuring out who I am, and I'm staying with a friend, a very good friend. They talked for another hour, and while it wasn't perfect, her mother still didn't fully understand, still worried about appearances and what people would say. It was honest, real, a foundation they could build on. That night, Marina found Alessandro in the hotel's library, a room she discovered was his retreat when the demands of running a business empire became overwhelming. He looked up from his laptop when she entered, and his smile made her heart skip. How did it go? He asked, already knowing she planned to call her mother. Better than I expected, harder than I hoped. Marina settled into the chair beside him. But necessary. I can't keep avoiding my real life. Something flickered across Alessandro's face. Was it fear? Does that mean you're leaving soon? Marina's heart clenched at the vulnerability in his voice. In the past 2 months, they'd grown so close that the thought of separation felt like contemplating amputation. I don't want to leave, she admitted. But Alessandro, I can't stay here in this liminal space forever. At some point, I need to go home, deal with a divorce, figure out what comes next. I have a life back in Chicago, or I had one. I need to face it. What if you didn't have to face it alone? Alessandro said quietly. He closed his laptop and turned to face her fully. What if you went back, handle what you need to handle, but with the knowledge that this us is waiting for you? Or, he paused, seeming to gather courage. Or, what if you can go back to your old life at all? What if you build a new one? What do you mean? Alessandro stood and walked to the window, overlooking the sea. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. I've been thinking about expansion, opening a small boutique hotel in the States. Nothing as large as the properties here, but something intimate, artistic, a place that combines hospitality with cultural experiences, art exhibitions, cooking classes, workshops with local artisans. I'd need someone to help me develop the vision, someone who understands both art and hospitality, someone who sees the transformative potential in bringing people together around beauty. Marina's pulse was racing. Alessandro. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. I'm asking you to be my partner, Marina, in business, yes, but also in life. If you'll have me, I know it's fast. I know you're still healing. But these past months you have shown me what I want my life to look like, and it looks like this. Us, building something meaningful together. Marina stood on shaking legs and crossed to where he stood. Are you asking me to move to Italy? I'm asking you to choose your own adventure, Alessandro said, taking her hands. If that means coming here, wonderful. If it means us building something in America together, I'm ready for that too. If it means long distance while you figure things out, I'll wait. I just need you to know that I'm in this. Marina, completely, irrevocably. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, precious and terrifying. Marina had thought she'd loved Derek, but what she felt for Alessandro was different in every way that mattered. This wasn't anxious attachment or desperate clinging. This was solid, real, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values, and the kind of deep knowing that only comes from truly seeing another person. I love you too, she whispered, and watched his face transform with joy. But Alessandro, I need to do this right. I need to go home, end my marriage properly, figure out who I am independent of any relationship. I've spent so much of my life defining myself through other people. First my mother, then Derek, and now I don't want to do that with you. I don't want to make you my whole world. I want to be a whole person who chooses you, not someone who needs you to feel complete. Alessandro pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in a way that felt like safety and possibility combined. That's exactly why I love you. Because you're brave enough to do the hard thing, the right thing, even when it's not easy. Take the time you need. I'll be here. Marina left for Chicago 2 weeks later. The goodbye was wrenching, tears and promises and a kiss at the airport that felt like both an ending and a beginning. But as the plane climbed into the sky and Italy shrank away beneath her, Marina felt something unexpected. Excitement, not for the difficult conversations and legal procedures ahead, but for the chance to prove to herself that she could stand on her own, that her happiness didn't depend on Alessandro or anyone else, but on her own choices and courage. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly quick. Derek didn't contest anything, probably too ashamed to drag out the process. Marina learned through mutual friends that he'd been seeing the woman from the pool for over a year, that their relationship had been an open secret to everyone but Marina. The betrayal stung, but it also validated her decision to leave. She hadn't been imagining the distance between them. She'd been seeing the truth even when she hadn't wanted to acknowledge it. Marina sold a house she'd share with Derek and used her half to do something she'd never allowed herself before. She enrolled in a graduate program in arts administration. If she was going to help Alessandro build something meaningful, she wanted to bring real expertise to the table, not just passion. She reconnected with old friends she drifted away from during her relationship with Derek, and was surprised by how readily they welcomed her back. She started painting again, selling a few pieces through a local gallery, and feeling pride at the sold stickers beside her work. She and Alessandro talked every day, video calls that stretched for hours, text messages that turned into conversations about everything and nothing. He sent her photographs of the garden, of new dishes the chef was experimenting with, of sunsets he wished he could see in person. She sent him pictures of her paintings, of the Chicago skyline in winter, of moments from her daily life that she wanted to share with him. I miss you, he told her one night. His face pixelated slightly on her laptop screen, but his warmth coming through clearly. The garden isn't the same without you. I miss you too, Marina admitted. But Alessandro, I'm doing good work here. Important work. I'm building something for myself, and it feels right. I know, he said softly. I can see it in you. You're different than when you first arrived on my cliff crying. Stronger, more yourself. Thanks to you, Marina said. No, Alessandro corrected gently. Thanks to you. I just held space for you while you figured things out. The work was all yours. 6 months after Marina left Italy, Alessandro flew to Chicago. Marina picked him up from the airport, and when she saw him walking through the arrival gate, her whole body flooded with warmth. He looked exactly the same, dark hair slightly mussed from the flight, wearing his characteristic simple elegance, and completely different, as if seeing him in her world rather than has transformed him somehow. They went to dinner at her favorite restaurant, a tiny Italian place in her neighborhood that couldn't compare to restaurants in the Moretti Empire, but that served food made with love. They talked and laughed and fell into their old rhythm as easily as breathing. Later, walking along the lakefront despite the November chill, Alessandro stopped and took both her hands. "I have a proposition for you," he said, and Marina's heart began to race. "I found a property, a beautiful old mansion in Evanston that used to be an artist's colony in the 20s. It's been abandoned for years, but the bones are good. It could be something special, exactly the kind of intimate, art-focused retreat we talked about." "Alessandro," Marina breathed, understanding dawning. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. I want to do this with you, Marina. Build something together. But more than that." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Marina's breath stopped entirely. "I want to build a life with you. Not because you need me or I need you, but because we choose each other. Because we're better together than we are apart." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring, a sapphire the exact color of the Mediterranean Sea. "Marina, will you marry me?" Marina's eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the tears she cried on that cliff all those months ago. These were tears of joy, of rightness, of knowing with absolute certainty that this was the choice her heart wanted to make. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, I'll marry you." Alessandro slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed there beside Lake Michigan with the city lights glittering around them and the future spreading out like a promise. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the Hotel Paradiso, in the garden Alessandro's mother had designed. Marina wore a simple dress she'd chosen herself, not to please anyone else, but because it made her feel beautiful and strong and completely herself. Her mother attended, along with a handful of close friends from both their lives. There was no dramatic production, no hundreds of guests to impress. Just two people choosing each other in front of the people who mattered most. The vows they wrote were simple and honest. Alessandro promised to always see her, to create space for her to grow even when that growth was uncomfortable. Marina promised to choose him every day, not from need but from want, not from fear but from love. They promised to build something meaningful together, not just a business, though the hotel would come, but a life filled with purpose and passion, and the kind of partnership that made them both better. The Hotel Paradiso Evanston opened a year later, and it was everything they dreamed it could be. The old mansion had been transformed into an intimate 20-room retreat, where every detail reflected their shared vision. Marina had curated rotating art exhibitions in the gallery space, bringing in local and international artists for shows and workshops. Alessandro had created a restaurant that served simple, elegant food that celebrated seasonal ingredients. They offered cooking classes, art intensives, writing retreats, experiences designed to help guests connect with their own creativity and passion. On the hotel's opening night, as they stood together watching guests wander through the space they created, Alessandro pulled Marina close. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Marina looked around at the art on the walls, including several of her own paintings, at the people laughing and connecting over good food and shared interests, at the life they'd built from the wreckage of her worst day. "I'm thinking about how strange life is," she said softly. "How what felt like an ending was actually a beginning. How the worst thing that ever happened to me led directly to the best thing that ever happened to me. No regrets." Alessandro asked. Marina turned in his arms to face him fully. This man who'd seen her at her lowest and helped her find her way back to herself. "Not a single one." "Well," she amended with a smile, "maybe I regret not running away to Italy sooner." Alessandro laughed and kissed her, there in their hotel filled with light and possibility, and all the beautiful chaos of life unfolding exactly as it should. "Better late than never," he murmured against her lips. And Marina, who had once thought her story was over before it had really begun, knew he was absolutely right. Sometimes you had to lose yourself completely to find who you were meant to be. Sometimes the worst heartbreak opened the door to the greatest love. Sometimes running away was really running toward everything you've been searching for all along. The Hotel Paradiso Evanston became known not just for its elegance or its art, but for the love story embedded in its foundation. The story of a woman who found herself and a man who'd been waiting to find someone real. Guests would sometimes ask Marina about how she and Alessandro met, and she'd smile and give them the simple version. I was lost, and he helped me find my way. But in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of them in the garden Alessandro had created in their courtyard as a tribute to his mother and a gift to Marina, she'd tell him the fuller truth. You didn't find me. You witnessed me finding myself. You held space while I became who I was always meant to be. And you did the same for me, Alessandro would reply, because it was true. Marina had transformed him too, had helped him see that his legacy wasn't just maintaining what his parents had built, but creating something new that honored their values while expressing his own vision. Together, they'd built a life that was uniquely theirs, messy and beautiful and full of purpose. Years later, when they'd expanded to include 2 more boutique properties and Marina's art was being shown in galleries across the country, when they had a daughter who loved the gardens as much as her grandmother had, when their life had become rich with meaning and connection, they'd sometimes talk about that day on the cliff, the day Marina ran away from one life and toward another. Do you think we would have found each other if Derek hadn't cheated? Marina asked once. Alessandro considered the question seriously, as he always did. I think we would have found each other eventually, but I'm grateful it happened when it did, how it did, because it meant you came to me ready to transform. And I got to witness that transformation. That's a gift most people never receive. Marina thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The people-pleaser tried to earn her mother's approval. The fiancée molded herself to fit Derek's expectations. The broken woman cry on a cliff. The emerging artist finding her voice. The confident businesswoman building something meaningful. The wife and mother and partner she'd become. Each version had been necessary to reach this one. Each pain had taught her something essential about who she was and what she wanted. I love you, she told Alessandro, not for the first time and not for the last time, but with the full weight of all those transformations behind the words. Thank you for seeing me. For all of me. Thank you for letting yourself be seen, Alessandro replied, pulling her close under the Italian sun that still felt like home even though home was now wherever they were together. Thank you for being brave enough to start over. Thank you for choosing me every single day. And really, Marina thought that was what love was. Not the fairy tale of love at first sight or the romance novel Meet Cute, but the daily choice to show up fully and authentically, to witness and be witnessed, to build something together that honored both individuals while creating something larger than the sum of its parts. The Mediterranean glittered in the distance, eternal and changing all at once, and Marina felt the same way, forever herself, forever transforming, forever growing toward the light. The woman who'd run crying down a cliff path would barely recognize the woman she'd become, and yet they were both her. All her versions, all her growth, all her hard-won wisdom lived in her bones and informed every choice she made. That was the real happily ever after Marina had learned. Not the absence of pain or difficulty, but the knowledge that you could survive it, grow from it, become more yourself because of it. Not finding someone to complete you, but finding someone who celebrated your completeness and added their own to create something beautiful and complex and wholly unique. As the sun set over the Hotel Paradiso, painting the sky in those impossible colors Marina never tired of witnessing, she and Alessandro walked hand in hand back to the residence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chapters in the story they were writing together. But tonight, there was just this, the weight of his hand in hers, the sound of the sea against the rocks, the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly who she was meant to be with, living exactly the life she'd chosen for herself. And that, Marina thought with a smile, was worth every tear she'd shed on that desperate day when one dream ended and another began. Worth every risk she'd taken, every uncomfortable conversation she'd had, every moment of uncertainty she'd pushed through to get here. The billionaire who'd found her crying on his property hadn't saved her. She'd saved herself. But he'd given her the space and support to do it, and together they created something neither could have built alone. That was the magic of real love, the kind worth waiting for, the kind worth fighting for, the kind worth choosing every single day. Not a rescue or completion, but a partnership, not an ending or beginning, but a continuous unfolding of possibility. Not happily ever after, but happily ever growing, ever changing, ever choosing each other and themselves in equal measure. And as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky and the sounds of laughter drifted up from the hotel below, Marina knew with absolute certainty that her story, their story, was just beginning.